Jonathan, I've been interested in parapsychology, ESP, for really my full intellectual life. And I love exploring how it might work or what. But what I have not been interested in doing is determining whether it's real or not, whether the phenomena is statistically valid or random and not, and all different kinds of falsifications of it that people say, from fraud to experimenter bias, all sorts of things. The reason I don't try to adjudicate the phenomena is because on both sides of the phenomena, people who are absolutely sure it exists for various reasons, some experiments, mostly anecdotal, people who are sure that it can't exist because it seems to be violating physical law, and that's impossible for physicalists. They are absolutely in solid concrete on their position. So therefore, I'm not going to bother with it. I'm just going to have fun with it. You're the first person that I am willing to have a conversation whether the phenomena is real or not, because of your approach to it. So tell me your approach, and I want to see if I can make any progress in seeing whether parapsychology, ESP, is real.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to help you understand whether or not parapsychology is real, but I can certainly tell you my approach. I have a motto, which is entertaining without endorsing. And where that comes from is my perspective when I've reviewed the evidence, where I see that there is sufficient evidence that it deserves consideration, that this is the combination of the number of studies that have been conducted with positive outcomes and the importance of it, if there were anything to be associated with it, leads me to conclude that it is deserving of entertaining. Whereas at the same time, the failures to replicate and the profound challenges in understanding how it could exist, if it did exist, what possible mechanisms there could be for it, lead me to feel that we're far from being able to endorse it as being a real phenomena at this point. But I think that it's really valuable for scientists to keep an open mind in this context, because there really have been a number of studies, numerous hundreds of studies that have found positive results, enough that makes us think that this is something worth considering. But there are also some very good reasons to be concerned about those results.
So one problem I would have with the reliability of the data and the reports, and meta studies done on dozens of cases to aggregate them together, is the starting point of many of these studies. If people had a lot of null results, they're going to change the experiment or do things. And then when they have a positive result, they're going to publish that, or they're going to talk about that, or that'll influence them themselves. And so that starting point to me is always, because I didn't know if that's where they started, and I would doubt that. I would say that they started a long time ago and now have come to this point where they got a result, which is it's not like a Boltzmann brain that comes out of the blue. It's predictable that if you do a certain number of things, you'll have a statistical significance within a boundary.
Absolutely. If you run 20 studies, chances are one of them is going to have significance at the 0.1 and 0.05 or less than 1 in 20 chance of having happened by chance. And so there's a big concern of this file drawer effect of all the studies that didn't work and you just published the ones that did, and that could plausibly be the source of the numerous positive parapsychological, or what's oftentimes referred to as psi results. Now there is another problem, and then there's also a solution. The other problem is that even if you didn't run 20 studies, if you analyzed your data 20 different ways and threw in this covariate or that covariate and threw out this condition and so on, there are all sorts of ways in which you can finesse a data set to try to pull something meaningful out of it, which makes it even worse.
I've seen it. It's the same phenomena that's like the Bible code, where you can read through Hebrew letters all sorts of magical numbers. I mean, you have enough letters, enough things, you can find you can find something. So in some studies I've seen where there wasn't a positive correlation, but there was a correlation to 3 later or 3 before. I mean, you make enough efforts to find the source, you'll find something.
Yeah, and that's a real concern. But there is a rigorous approach for getting at this, and happily, psi researchers are now beginning to adopt this approach. Unhappily, as far as I know, they are not getting the results that they want when they do it. Unhappily for some, happily for others, I should say. And this is called pre-registration, where you, before you run a study, you pre-register exactly what you are going to do and exactly how you're going to analyze the data. And that reduces the degrees of freedom. Then you can go back and see, well, did they run 20 other pre-registered studies that didn't work? Did they analyze it the way that they said they would? And if, using this more modern approach of pre-registration, if we can get these kinds of effects robustly in that context, that's going to be a lot harder to dismiss. We're not there yet.
You know, there's a whole other way to look at this, and that is to look at anecdotal evidence. And certainly throughout human history, in every single culture, there's an enormous amount of anecdotal evidence that would be what we call ESP, parapsychology, or the more scientific term, anonymous cognition. And the easy to dismiss because there's a lot of stuff that didn't happen. If I think, you know, my friend fell off a bicycle, I dreamt that. Well, there was a lot of other things that didn't happen that I could have dreamed about. So, I mean, there's a lot of things to do that. But the argument is that maybe, or could ESP be something that is not, because of its bizarre mechanism, not subject to replicability? Could you have a real phenomena that's not subject to replicability?
I am reluctant to answer that question only because the answer I'm going to give is not going to be popular with my rigorous colleagues who I greatly respect. But my personal answer to that is, I think that is quite possible, and if I sort of sink into where my own personal leanings are, maybe even likely. I think it is possible that there are some aspects of existence that may forever elude full scientific scrutiny, and yet nevertheless be true. To take a really strong case, it may never be possible to know with absolute certainty that I'm having a subjective experience. We may never be able to prove objectively the single thing we know the best, which is qualia, which is subjective experience. So it's already on the table that there could be absolutely fundamental things that we can't decidedly know. So I think it's possible that there may be complexities to anomalous cognition that are such that we will never be able to reproduce the precise conditions that are required in order to consistently get robust effects of anomalous cognition, even if anomalous cognition is a thing, and even if that quality of anomalous cognition is what drives us to think it's a thing.